All right, everybody. It's Gratex.
What's up?
We got Gratex on the line, finally.
Yay! Finally, how you doing?
I've got my issues, but I'm doing okay. Not too shabby. If I was hanging out in a Scottish bar and a young lassie asked me that same question, I would only say I'm doing wonderfully well.
Of course, that's how it works.
Yeah. Oh, you're gonna tell me how it works?
That's where I should be right now.
So what time is it there in Great Britain?
20 to 8 in the evening, so
20 to 8.
I've already been out and done all my bad things already, so it's pretty much, I'm not going out again.
Oh, I see. Well, I guess the first thing to ask a Scotsman is, are they pro-independence, or are they happy with their position currently? Oh yeah, that's a toughie right there. Maybe it's just obvious.
I think most people just don't care.
Oh really?
They just simply don't care.
Well, I used to live with a Scotsman in Los Angeles when I first moved down there, and an Englishman in an apartment, and they argued a little bit, and to this day that Scotsman is pro-independence and keeps dropping all these pro-independent Facebook links onto Facebook. So he cares, and that's why I thought maybe Gratex is one of these types that wants independence from England.
Yeah, well, nobody's more patriotic than an expat.
Huh.
Well, you leave the country and all of a sudden you become more Scottish than you were when you were in Scotland. It's just one of these things. But more than anything, I think it's just, with Scotland and England, it's just majority versus minority. That's all it comes down to. The mentalities in people on both sides of the border are just majority versus minority. And it's complicated that way, but I'm for independence just purely because, you know, down south in England, they're more right-wing. I don't care about any nationalist bullshit. I'm like a quarter English anyway. A lot of my friends, I've got English friends, you know, so I don't really care about any of that stuff, and I don't meet a lot of people who do actually care about it. Like 10% of the population of Scotland is English, so it's not as if anybody has any kind of reasonable excuse to be a bigot towards them. But I think more than anything, it's just purely political for most people. We just want away from like this overwhelming right-wing sort of feudalistic style government that's down there. So that's pretty much what I want.
I see. Okay. Huh, I had no idea that it was really right-wing. I mean, is it all just about legalizing marijuana? Is that what it's all about?
Well, we're all commies in Scotland, and down south, you know, they're all kind of, every Englishman's home is his castle sort of mentality, you know. That's how it goes down there.
I see. Right on. So, Gratex took a little run there, a little run away. So, what about that red background of yours in the couch? You got that as your main headquarters for YouTube videos? Is that in your living room, or are you borrowing a neighbor's living room?
It's my little attic flat, and it's nice and cozy. Too much of a mess to show you. You know, it's like if I were to show you what my room looked like, it would inspire Old Fan to make a diorama. Okay, it's kind of Emendum level mess, and it's not acceptable for broadcast.
So what was it that attracted you to YouTube anyway? Out of curiosity, I mean, you're from the old guard because you've been around for some time, but I mean, you didn't go to YouTube.eu, you went to YouTube.com. You got onto the big YouTube. I think it's the big YouTube, even though in Brazil, Brazilians are heavy into their YouTube, and I think they actually have more subscribers down there than the U.S. does. But what turns you on to YouTube.com?
Well, okay, but before I answer that, it's interesting you think .com is like American, isn't it? It's like, because in the UK we have .co.uk, which is a company in the UK, but I don't really distinguish. To me, it's always been the internet is without borders, so it doesn't really bother me. I go where the most people are. And I've been in internet forums for years, chat rooms for years, prior to going to YouTube, so it just seemed like the most reasonable course of action. It's a public square. I first started watching videos on YouTube of a guy called Mexican. I can't remember exactly, it's like M3X1CAN or something like that, and he was heavily into politics. And he was pretty much on the front page of YouTube. Like, every time he released a video, we're talking like 50,000 views. Wow, that's like big, old school, you know, more views than anything. That's the equivalent of like a Justin Bieber video today, you know?
Right.
And I got involved in that sort of stuff, you know, talking politics with people. He turned out to be a total sham, you know, personality complex type person. But from there, it was just like, okay, I'll just make YouTube videos talking about politics because there just didn't seem to be any of it going on in YouTube. And then I encountered all these like crazy racist right-wing white supremacist people which I'd never really encountered before, and had arguments with them. And then I encountered all sorts of fascinating, interesting people like Emendum and that crazy PTSD guy that used to bother me, one of these randists. I never encountered a randist before it came to YouTube, you know? And it was so exciting to hear all these strange and foreign ideas that seem so farcical from an outsider's perspective. And that's what I do. It's like I enjoy listening to people's ideas, even if they seem crazy to me. I like listening to them. I like discussing with them, like arguing with them, and all that kind of shit. So basically, it's a hobby, and it's the longest hobby I've ever had.
Right on. Right on. And what would you say your other hobbies are that are less indoor?
I couldn't possibly go into that.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, I know it's probably some perverted shit, but wait, no, maybe not. No, I'm I just throw that out there. But yes, I did think that you know when the internet first came about, when I kind of got on it was about 2000, 1999, 2000. It seemed international because I would jump onto chat rooms and there would be Chinese people and Portuguese speaking people and English speaking people, and then Yahoo came around and they partitioned the U.S. from Brazil and China from the UK, and they dropped all these partition lines, and then and .com seemed to just be the U.S. because all the other ones were particular to their country. So I did think, in fact, that And I don't know, is there a YouTube that's specifically for the UK? Is it YouTube? No? Okay, so you guys default to our YouTube. Oh yeah, no, no. But I did think that there was this huge partitioning that went on the net, and it was kind of saddened by it actually. But it does clear things up. I mean, I don't do searches and pull up any Chinese results. It's specific to your location unless you query for it. So, okay, right on.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like if you type in the name of a shop or a store, as you call them, it will bring up your local one, and it's kind of disturbing, but it's kind of pragmatic at the same time. But when I started on the internet, it was 1997 when I was at university, and there were no browsers and crap like that. It was just basically like Telnet and Unix and things like that, and Usenet. Usenet is still going strong today, I guess. But bulletin board systems where you chat with people, Telnet-based chat programs, that's what I used to use, and that was my first real contact with yonder American types. And it was quite interesting. There's a lot of people who, I don't know, I think a lot of people have these kind of obsessions with their favourite shows and their favourite comic book characters and stuff, and they name themselves after them. That's the first time I ever encountered that.
Uh-huh.
What am I looking at here?
Oh, I just wanted to get you on the YouTube channel, proof of video that this isn't just a recording that I've rehearsed good interactions with.
For posterity, yeah.
Oh yeah. Actually, I have Gratex in the room.
And yeah, I want you to paint something for me, something that's fitting of a red wall. I don't think I can afford $1,000, but
Well, I can always do one of my classic clowns, and those are pretty large. Those are like 2 feet by 3 feet, and give you something to hang on that red wall of yours. And yeah, that'd be great. Maybe when I'm done with this. But I do suffer droughts in my sales. I just had a sale, but I'm taking all the proceeds from that and I'm giving it to a musician so I can use his music in this film that's being made. And so that's what's going on with my fundage. But I am trying to raise money for a multi-level marketing art company, and so I'm thinking about taking all of my savings and dumping it into that. But the ethics of a multi-level marketing company, it's a very rare breed of people that enjoy joining those things, but apparently there's a lot of them. But unfortunately, I thought if I'm going to do this and actually distribute physical prints, physical art, I can't afford to ship it to England. I would actually have to go and set up a shop, a distribution shop in England, and then ship all the prints over there and then have them distributed throughout Great Britain. So it's been gnawing at my head how to build a company with an actual product. Oh yeah.
Well, don't send them to England. Send them to Scotland, and I'll do it for you. There you.
See now.
Unless we become independent.
Right. And what is that on the voting block or something? Are people arguing about it because they want it, or is this just a spillover from Braveheart?
There's a referendum in September on whether we will become independent or not. So it's coming this year, and it's risky, very risky for people. I might lose my job because I work for a UK corporation. There's going to be massive upheaval if it does happen, but ultimately I think we will be better off economically, just purely because all the oil fields in the UK are in Scotland, but really the propaganda's coming out and the political parties are, talking all their usual shite. But really, I don't think it's going to happen, so there's no point in talking about it, to be honest with you. It's just not going to happen. There was one in the 60s as well, and that referendum failed, so here we go, round two, another failure.
Well,
But yeah, I was going to say, like, I was in Glasgow a few weeks ago, and there was this little art shop. I didn't have time to go in, but just looking in the windows, and it was amazing how similar their painting style was to yours. I mean, I'm no painter,
oh wow.
but I was looking at all this artwork, and it was like, wow, that looks like DOS book stuff. You know, there were no clowns in it, obviously, but just basically your style, the colours you use. What I've got to do is go back there and get some photographs for you, because it was just astounding how all these artworks look like yours, basically.
Wow. Wow, that's really, you know, I'm interested to see that because, you know, I feel like I'm just kind of following around and I'm following patterns that just kind of come together, and I don't know how they come together, but it's like culture changes and you keep up with the culture. You just automatically keep up with the cultural band, and you don't know why you're doing it. You just happen to be doing it. Um, Boy, when I stood up, I got really lightheaded. Lost my frame of thought there. All the blood rushed to my nutsack. But yeah, wow. Wow. Okay. Now that I've got you on speaker, I can actually walk away from the computer and take a gander back and do another one of my heavy duty smoke breaks while I'm trying to get through my pack number 6 before I get on the Nicorette gum.
Cool. I want to ask you about this documentary, because that's like, I didn't even know what was happening. What's this all about? And you know, tell me all.
Well,
I want to interview you about your documentary.
well, I don't want to say too extra much, but basically I took in this guy who has really wealthy parents, but they cut him off financially, and so he was destitute. And since he came from a really wealthy family, he didn't really have a good work ethic, and so he sat in my back room and he watched videos all day, mostly ghost stories and such. And I got to talking about my art and the fact that I chased stars and leaped off of roofs and jumped trains and swam in swamps and all this weirdo shit that is tied to my quote-unquote spirituality. And he said, well, that would make for a good documentary, that plus all of your art. And so he put an ad on Craigslist for a cameraman, and he thought that he would do the interviews for the documentary, and we'd get a cameraman, and the whole thing would last, you know, 3-4 weeks of filming. Anyway, this cameraman ends up replying, and before you know it, I'm in an argument with this guy because he's not doing anything, not the cameraman, but the guy staying with me. We get into this little tussle about him staying here and how he's not applying for work, and I'm loaning him all of my spare change, all of my spare money and everything. Before you know it, he ends up moving out. He drops the project altogether, and the cameraman had filmed a 20-minute documentary of bison on a local island here called Antelope Island, of all things, Antelope Island with bison on it, but it's kind of our reserve for bison. Anyway, and so the cameraman decided to take on the whole project himself, and for over the last year he's been kind of following me around at arts festivals and so forth, and videotaping me and dialogue, and then a lot of people who have purchased art, as well as a lot of people who are mostly art collectors, mostly people that are buying prints and so forth. But he's also interviewed family and family friends and stuff like that, just to kind of get a gist of of who I am. And so hopefully the whole thing is more about art, and I'm like a central point stemming from art outward. But at the same time, I don't know. He's going to build it the way he'd like to build it, and then I get a yay or a nay about what goes into it. And that's the whole of it. That's the gist. Thanks for asking.
Does it feel weird having a documentary made about you?
Yeah, it's really, I wouldn't have disclosed all of my quote unquote spiritual crap if this guy wasn't following me around, if this guy wasn't videotaping me, about broken feet and whatnot. Yeah, it's very weird. It's very awkward actually. And I guess I've let out the cat out of the bag by mentioning it a few times on YouTube, and that's why you're asking, when I probably should have kept it under wraps.
Yeah, well, I heard the story about how you broke your feet, and before then, I imagined it was some kind of crazy, impulsive parkour thing you were pulling off. But, to open up like you did in the way that you did about how you broke your feet was amazing, and I wish I could be so open.
Mm. Yeah, it's really gutted me. As a matter of fact, my disclosure in YouTube videos, my talking about my painting and discussing it, I wouldn't have been so open, and I wouldn't have disclosed these internal personal perspectives had this documentary guy, had I not known that he was going to be filming, I wouldn't have disclosed that information. I imagine anybody that has a cameraman following them around would kind of feel the same way. But
hey, I live in Britain. There's cameras everywhere.
So on a different note, Gratex, when you bump into philosophical arguments on value and morals, and you appeal to the subjective, how do you feel about bumping into people that disagree with you? Carte blanche, out of hand, altogether, if you will.
They should all die.
Great answer.
Only kidding, of course. I just feel like I said, is there any other way of valuing something other than through this prism of perspective that we have? Even if we have a machine that measures something and gives us a value, it's a machine that we've designed to show us what we want to see. It all comes down to this sentience thing, valuing things, and having a perspective that's more or less a fixed point in space and time. And I don't see how there could be anything as an objective value or an objective moral or, even aesthetics as well. Some alien species comes here and doesn't understand art and doesn't understand our art. Because of this whole cultural evolution of how we understand these things, as where we get a lot of our values from, because we get a shared historical value system. It's entirely subjective. It might be based upon the subjective notions of multiple people, but still it comes from individuals at the end of the day.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you more so than your arch nemesis Amendum on that topic. It's interesting though that we do learn quite a bit about how to act in society from our parents and our community. But I tend to agree that for the most part, our moral code stems from the outside, but then it re-navigates and centers itself internally as an individuated perspective on value. And so then I'm back to agreeing with you. I'm back to sensing things the way that I believe that you sense them.
Good. That means you don't have to die.
Right. Yeah, I was hoping I wouldn't have to die. Yeah, I was also hoping at some point to be able to travel there. I've only been to Europe once, and that was a stop in Paris. But I wouldn't mind the whole Scotland tour. Just the mountainscapes, following along in Mel Gibson's footsteps, and drinking like a madman in some of the pubs. I figured you could take me on that.
Well, I'm up for that.
Yeah, you mentioned that. That would be a riot. That'd be a good ass time. It's
just come in the summer.
Come in the summer. The winter, you just stay indoors in the winter for the most part?
Stay indoors and drink and grumble. That's what we do. It's why we're such dour people over here, or dour people, is because it's so dark and cold and windy and wet and horrible for 6 months of the year.
So the Pink Floyd line, quiet desperation is the English way, actually applies to Scottish people too. Is that what I'm supposed to understand?
I don't know. I think that line comes from this kind of grumbling acceptance of being inferior. I think that's where that line in that song comes from. And in Scotland, we're always been the underdog because we're the minority, so we don't have that grumbling acceptance. We have our chip on our shoulder about it instead, and reject that kind of system. Half the country did have a feudal history, like most of England's had a feudal history for centuries. The other half is a clan system, which was still had its hierarchy in place, but still there was never this kind of, subservience and accepting the yoke put on your back by your master sort of thing in that system. So I think it is more of an English historical thing than the Scottish thing, but still I come from like halfway between the lowlands and the highlands, and the lowlands was the feudal area and the highlands were the clan area. So I guess there's kind of half and half here, it's kind of a weird mixture. But yeah, it certainly is the English way, and that's why they are so right-wing just now. I think a lot of the bullshit that's been happening politically in Britain is a result of people just accepting being oppressed, because I think there's some kind of masochistic enjoyment about being oppressed in Britain. It's like they're oppressing me and I could be angry about it and I could grumble and moan about it, and that makes me happy. And that's what I consider to be the British psyche.
So what do you think about Duck Dynasty in the U.S.? Kind of this bearded sort of Southern. It's not dissimilar to Scotland in that the South lost the Civil War, and people in the Ozarks and in the Appalachian, they don't particularly like American politics as they see it. So I don't know. I don't know whether or not you find any similarities, and what you think about the Irish. I'm curious on what you think about the Irish in this milieu.
The Irish is like another island altogether to me. There's lots of Irish people living in my town, and they're all quite happy, fine people. I deal with Irish people in my work, and I don't feel any affinity with Irish people. They're on an entirely different island from me. It's like So this whole Scottish-Irish thing doesn't make much sense to me, but it makes sense to Americans because a lot of Scottish people went to Ireland and then went from Ireland to the Americas, and that's where a lot of the so-called Irish Americans or plastic paddies come from. But as far as Duck Dynasty is concerned, it's like, why do people watch reality TV? It's just crazy to me to think, you know, you're going to watch people's embellished lifestyles on a television set. But, you know, it's cheap TV to make, so people will watch it. But I don't think, you know, this whole... Well, a lot of people say to me that a lot of the people in the Appalachians and all the rednecks, and in the South generally in particular, were Scottish migrants. And, you know, probably, I really don't care. There were Scottish migrants who were slaves, there were Scottish migrants who were slave masters. But I don't think it's really got anything to do with contemporary Scotland. All my ancestors stayed here, so I don't feel any guilt about the slave trade. But I don't think it's a similar mentality. I think Scotland, even in the rural areas, there are a lot of people who are still very traditional and speak in, you know, very hard to understand Scots. But for the most part, they're all freaking hippies, you know? If you go out into the Highlands and Islands, you'll find a whole bunch of hippies who are like 50 and 60 years old. It's where all the hippies go to retire. You know, they all go to the Highlands and Islands. You know, 10% of Scotland's English, and the majority of them, I would say, from my personal experience travelling around the country, is where all the English hippies go to retire. And that's a good thing, because when you go out there, they're all nice people. They don't shoot you for being on their land because they're not allowed to. You know, you can even, you know, camp on their land. I've done that as well. I cycled across the country, just camping here, there, and everywhere. And there's nothing they can do to you. There's nothing they can do to stop you, because there's a law in this country that says you have the right to roam, even over people's private property, as long as you're not hitching up a tent outside their kitchen window, you know?
Well, I just watched a movie filmed in Scotland last night called Tonight You're Mine, about rock stars, a girl band and a guy band getting together, kind of based on handcuffs. And it showed this huge multi-acre property with different amusement rides and bands playing and this huge festival. And I thought, there's more people in that film than I thought actually existed in Scotland. You know, it was quite a large amount, and I just, my perspective of places is pretty, you know, I'm pretty ignorant. But and I don't know if you've heard of that film at all, but
I haven't.
Yeah, Tonight You're Mine.
What's the population of Utah?
Population of Utah is about 2.5 million. So it's quite a few. There's quite a few people out there, and it's one of the faster growing states in terms of populace, and that's just, you know, based on Mormon breeding habits.
Yeah.
But so I'm really curious of this this other topic, which is your attempt to get in the States and getting to New York airport and then being turned around, something like that. To be honest, I can't remember who told me that, but somebody that I know.
Citizen Worm?
Yeah, it could have been Citizen Worm. I think she even mentioned that it was a sensitive topic for you and that I probably shouldn't bring it up, but
it's not sensitive. I think she blames herself, but you know, it's. I think that's where it comes from. You know, I mean, it's like when I got off the plane, all the single guys were basically rounded up and put into this area and probed and tested and so on. You know, but I'll start from the beginning. I was unhappy where I was. I was unhappy with my job, and I thought, you know, this is just going nowhere. I fancy a change in my life, something radical. and I was quite chatty with Citizen Worm at the time, Erin. We used to chat on, what was it, Stickam or something? That old website that's dead now. And, you know, so she's like, well, I need a roommate. And I was like, okay, well, fine, we get along. You know, I'll just quit all this shit and tie up all the loose ends here and move over. And, you know, it was going to be an illegal immigration, so I think that was the big problem for the good old cops. And that's, you know, where I got caught. I thought I did enough to, you know, cover my tracks. I had a good bank account. I didn't actually quit my job. I took a holiday, so I still had an open job. So if they like phoned my employer, you know, they would still say that I'm working there. So, you know, everything was fine. And then, you know, when I got to the airport, they searched through all my shit. They wanted access to my friggin' mobile phone. And, you know, I was thinking maybe I shouldn't give them access because, you know, that's like saying I'm guilty in some way. So I gave them access, and they found lots of messages from me to other people saying, you know, yeah, I'm leaving, goodbye, and all that kind of shit. And they were like, well, it's clear you intend to fucking stay here. So I was like, well, shit, you know, I can't deny it. And so they sent me back, and they sent me to London. And I'm like, so I land in London, I get sent to a friggin' police station in London, where they give me my passport back, and it's like, okay, this is great fun. I now have no job and no house, and I'm in fucking, you know, Englandshire. What a disaster. So, you know, and that was the start of a new adventure.
So, but you didn't think you were going to take up residence in London by any means. You just bolted right back to Scotland and picked up where you left off, it sounds like.
I stayed in London for a couple of weeks, looked for a job. There was a job down there similar to the one I was doing, and it was paying like double the wages that I get here, you know. It's double the wages that I got here. So I thought, this is fantastic, you know, this is an opportunity, you know, because at that point I was just like, anything that was better than what I was doing and what my situation was is an improvement. So I went for a job there, I looked for housing in the area, and you know, it was crazy because London's like, those parts of London is just like here, you know, except different street layouts. You know, the same buildings. It's such a terrible country. It's like the same architects making the same shitty housing, and it's just the street layouts are slightly different, you know. Except there's more black people in London than there is in Scotland, you know. But that's the only difference, you know. The black people are in the working class areas, whereas I live in the friggin' working class areas. So, but that didn't work. I didn't get the job anyway, so I just came up and saved my parents for a while, and then got myself back on my feet and, you know, sorted my shit out, you know. But it's a mini adventure. But if you do come over here, I promise that you will not be fingerprinted and probed when you get through customs. They'll just say, "How you doing?" And then they'll let you in the country to roam around, you know, causing havoc and so on.
Well, you know, I did get turned back at the Canadian border of all borders, but they thought I was going up there to sell art because I had my car full of art, and so that was rather weird for me. I didn't know what to make of it, but and then when I was going to Paris, I thought, you know, if I didn't get into Canada, that record might show up when I'm trying to get into Paris, but no such luck. They just invited me in, and it was good fun. It was great. Got to see Picasso. My hotel was right next to one of Picasso's apartments. So
that would be great.
Yeah, that was great. I think it's where he painted Guernica. Is at that time. but I wasn't allowed inside of that. Instead, I went into Eugene Delacroix's apartment and studio and looked at his paintings, and that was fabulous as well. You know,
I don't even know who that is. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. He's kind of a realistic painter. I'm trying to think of. I think he was, 1800s, mid 1800s that he was alive in Paris. But
I just remember one of your videos on YouTube, one of your webcam videos. You said you're trying to be as realistic as possible. You don't want any abstract stuff in this painting. And at that moment in time, I'm thinking, you're depicting hell. It doesn't exist. It's not real. What are you talking about?
Well, I think what I meant is that I wanted realistic depictions, and that's kind of why I ended up doing a lot of basic symbolism that kind of looks like a Lego playground with action figures in it, as opposed to something that was really, more visceral and screaming, kind of a nasty screaming hell. But yeah, it's interesting that I said that. It's by realistic, I wanted it to express this series of symbols that I went through to reach this, for lack of a better word, kind of a meditation on burning, that felt quote unquote like I was burning in hell internally. And then I watched a series of this Catholic priest, this East Indian Catholic priest, say that's when you have a sensation of burning, that's the deepest form of prayer that you can be in, is a burning prayer mode. And I was trying to dodge at that point red colored things, orange colored things secondarily, anything that reminded me of a hellish depiction, and I couldn't escape it. It was on the radio. I was hearing songs about being bound to hell and kind of loveless bluesy, modern bluesy songs, and so I was left to just suck it up and deal with whatever it was I was going through. But yeah, that's what turned me on to wanting to paint hell, was this burning sensation that I had. You know what it's like to burn yourself.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, as most people. But I'm not. I guess the closest hot plate, I have a fireplace here with the word Inferno above it. I have a coffee pot here of all mundane things to put in. That coffee being heated up is somehow a symbol of something negative. Speaking of that, let me walk over here and refill my cup. That just reminded me.
Do I see a sheep in that painting? It looks like a sheep with goggles on.
Well, there's a sheep in there. I don't know if it has goggles on. I didn't put goggles on it. Let me point out the sheep that I put in right here. Is this what you're? Yeah.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, I just found this really bullish looking sheep, these really fat sheep, and so I'm great that you saw it as a sheep. Even though, I'm really considerate of light source in the reference material that I'm using, and so the lights on that sheep, when I pull it up again, are going to be different than the lights on this cat that I have. And I'm trying to make way for this angel to descend down to earth here, and another angel over here holding up a cloak. Kind of like this.
So how does the sheep fit into hell?
No, it doesn't fit into hell. This is the top part of hell right here, going down, and then this earth right here, and then it's heaven up here. So the whole thing is one huge transition. but I wanted like a nice landscape of Earth with a lot of animals on it in the Earth area, and then moving up into the cloudy angel cherub land up here, and so I thought that would be a good depiction, but models, I really need human models. And I went to this bar and I met this woman who has, it was uncanny that her eyes were a few millimeters bigger, her eye sockets were a few millimeters bigger and wider than the average eye sockets. And I mentioned I was painting angels, and immediately she said, well, I'm an atheist. And I thought, well, that shouldn't have a damn thing to do with the fact that I'm painting angels. And I didn't ask her to model, even though I probably should have. Just because she would have really fit the bill here that I'm trying to put forth. Even my Christ figure.
It's pretty ballsy to be.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, man.
No, you're fine.
It's pretty ballsy to be an atheist in Utah, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of them. It's kind of. I actually thought Utah has kind of this punkish culture that I imagined occurred in London, as kind of a rebellion against the, whatever the status quo is, King Henry's Bible. I think I'm getting that correct. Oh no, the King James version. That the whole biblical world, money, pound, supply, all being in central focus would cause a huge right-wing emergence in the English area, and that there would be this kind of punkish, kind of a hyper rebellion against it in that location, and so it would have a lot of punks in it, and Utah seems to have a lot of punks, where LA is mostly just really relaxed, but it's got a lot of gangs, and in the South doesn't have a lot of punks, or if they do, it's a different breed. It's a different thing they're fighting against. So I say. But who knows? Do you feel like London has a huge punk population?
I think London is mostly metrosexual people with no great identity other than, the usual crap. These bloody young people and their ideas and so on, That's pretty much what it's like.
Okay.
I don't think there's any great cultural move coming out of, Britain at the moment. I don't think there will be in any time soon, basically.
Okay.
I think people are too comfortable. I think that's what it comes down to. People are comfortable living in their little niches, and there's no great rebellion on the way. There's no great revolution on the way. People are just happy, identifying with what they identify and finding their little niche and fitting into it. And if that's what they're happy with, then that's what they're happy with. I've got no reason to grumble with, despite being obviously a grumbling Scotsman.
Yeah, that's a given. Well, and would you say there's a lot of grumbling Scotsmen that you kind of are? Do you feel like you're really unique there, or do you feel like you're a bit generic as far as how the men are over in Scotland? How would you place yourself in your communal environment?
I think I keep up with the rest of the guys, It's just like we've got the witty banter and all that kind of thing, and I keep up with that and I enjoy it. But when they start talking about football and all the usual shite they talk about, it's like, okay, I'm out the door now. But more or less, yeah, it's a crazy culture, We're all sort of really intelligent, but on the other hand, we like to avoid talking about things that are intelligent, and showing your intelligence is kind of faux pas as well.
Uh-huh.
It's a really strange culture we have here, where we don't want to seem clever, but on the other hand, we do like to show how clever we are. It's undescribable.
Okay. Well, that makes some sense. You know, reserving yourself. But, oh, okay.
It's a cost thing, man. You know, it's a cost thing. It's like you don't want to seem like you're too well read, but on the other hand, you don't want to seem like you're just totally stupid. You know, and we're an underdog country, and we don't want to seem like we've crawled too far out of the crab bucket. But on the other hand, we don't want to be at the bottom of the bucket as well.
Well, what about physicians and engineers? Are they fairly modest also in your culture there? Would you say, or do they follow suit and not express their high degree of education?
With engineers, in what way?
Well, you know, just kind of like engineers and physicians are educated for, you know, into their PhD and then beyond their PhD levels, and so they might exude more of a presence of, hey, I've got my shit together more than you do. And so I'm just saying, since you mentioned that people are a little bit more reserved about not wanting to express how intelligent they are, that maybe the engineers and the physicians maintain that modesty as well, or are they a little bit more forthcoming?
I think because in the oil industry, this is the biggest engineering industry we have in this country. Because engineers have to mix with, you know, workers, it isn't that much of a problem. You know, it's like they go out on oil rigs out in the North Sea, and they're there for 2 weeks or a month, and they have to spend time with each other. That they kind of grow to understand each other, so it isn't really a problem. But as far as some kind of intellectual elitism is concerned, there isn't really anything like that in this country. You know, it just appears to be some kind of, you know, acceptance that, you know, we're all in it together. We're all kind of socialist. Even the right wingers are socialist. You know, the leaders of the Conservative Party in Scotland, the leader of the Conservative Party in Scotland is a lesbian, and you know and she's the most right wing person in the country. You know, it's just relative to each culture, really. Although there are classist problems in this country, like there's the 1% of the population own like 50% of the land and all that kind of shit. You know, I remember getting turned away from some really posh restaurant because, you know, I was too scruffy looking. You know, all that kind of mentality still exists in this country, but it's frowned upon, and I think that's where it needs to be. It needs to be in that realm of being frowned upon. They can still live in that mentality of being better than everybody else, but still there's this kind of, I can't remember what the Swedish name for it is, but there's this mentality in Sweden that, you know, what makes you think you're better than us sort of mentality. It's too extreme in Sweden, I think, but I think we've got a good sort of grasp in it in Scotland. You know, it's kind of, we're halfway between Anglo-Saxon and Scandinavian in a way, and it's kind of working out well, I think.
Oh, here's a bit of a technical question. I heard that, you know, the Anglos and the Saxons were originally two different sects, or that Anglo was more of, you know, a genetic cultural tribish group that bumped into the Saxons, but there's something called the Judic, so you can get Anglo-Judics and Anglo-Saxons, and that there's different types of Anglo groups up there that were mixing amongst each other in the long past. Have you ever heard anything about like Anglo-Judics?
That's the first I've ever heard of it, sorry.
Okay. And maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. Maybe it's different than how I'm pronouncing it. But
what's the spelling of it?
I thought it was Judic, Judic, but there might be something else that's a group that's like that meshed. And I've attempted to Google it at one time or a couple of times to figure out where it was, and I wasn't coming up with too many results. But a subgroup of the Anglo-Saxon was Anglo. Maybe it was like Judah, not Judah, but huh. Yeah, now I'm on the spot and I'm not pulling it out. But that's why I was asking you whether or not you guys ever split the Anglo-Saxon group into subdivisions, or whether or not you just keep a conversation about Anglo-Saxon as if it's all white people from the north there, like Caucasians and Anglo-Saxons are, the Anglos are a subsect of the Caucasus, and then Saxon is a subset of the Anglos, and another subsect of the Anglos was this Judic area, and that was based on these geographical locations. But I may be way off.
Sounds
on
like
that.
something that Alex Jones.
Oh shit, I don't want to be compared to Alex Jones because I'm looking for some ad mix there, but
I don't know, man. I don't know much about English history, to be honest with you. I know that they were invaded by the Normans in 1066, and they were invaded by the Romans in blah, blah, blah BC, but I don't really know too much. I know that there's a lot of Northern European influence in this country that stems from like the end of the last ice age, when 90% of this country was covered in ice and there was no North Sea. And I know that Old English, Middle English, and Lowland Scots is almost equivalent to like Walloons in Belgium and a lot of regional dialects in the Netherlands across the North Sea. I know there's all these Germanic influences on the language, and the Scots language is very harshly influenced by German. But there's never been any German invaders to this country. But it's just really, we don't know enough about our own history because it's freaking thousands of years old, It's like Americans know a lot about their own history because it's all within the timescale of the printed press. But in this country, it's like we don't freaking know. We know that the Gaels came from somewhere. Did they come from France? Did they come from Israel? We don't know where they came from. We know that they went up to they left the Mediterranean and moved north through Spain, France, Ireland, and England, and Wales, and Scotland. But we don't know much more than that. We've got lots of historical relics in this country, Pictish standing stones and cairns and everything else, and we know absolutely nothing about them. There are settlements in Scotland in the Orkneys that are 7,000 years old. 7,000 years old, just after the last ice age, relatively speaking. Why the fuck were people living there? I've been to the north coast of Scotland, and I'm thinking, holy crap, that looks like a horrible place to live. And just after the last ice age, it must have been extremely worse. Where did they come from? Why did they go there? What were they running from? Nobody knows. It's all a big freaking mystery. And I feel sorry for Americans not having that mysterious sort of aspect of their origins. We just simply do not know. It's out of folk knowledge now. It's just some kind of, Robin Hood style, Braveheart, Mel Gibson style bullshit that we have to talk about these things,
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean the lost in historic mystery would be much more fascinating. Where we pull up archaeology normally of Native Americans, or there was apparently a Caucasian skull found off the coast of Oregon that supposedly was a few thousand years old, and which is really weird that it was in the Pacific end instead of the Atlantic side. And then occasionally we find through archaeological digs things that appear as if their roots are from England, that we find in the Midwest, but these are all speculative as far as whether or not they're actually pulling up archaeology or they're pulling up somebody that planted these artifacts. But as far as finding major artifacts of ancient civilizations or anything, and I bring this up because LDS folklore, talks about these ancient civilizations occurring in the Americas, 600 years ago and earlier, and it appears that there's no archaeological evidence for what they're proclaiming. I mean, that goes kind of without saying. But yeah, it would be interesting to be over there and grow up in the midst of mystery as you all have over there. I don't know what that does for your sense of ground, your sense of kind of a sense of your groundedness in history, how it enlightens you, or how it makes you feel more maybe buoyant because you don't know your past. You're just kind of plopping up in your environment. But you have more history than we do, but I can see how it's obfuscated through these areas of just not knowledge, just notions of settlements. Facts of settlements, I should say. Come on, Gratex, you don't know who did the who settled those lands? You don't quest and query. You don't make a deal out of it. Like let me ask you this: do you have any what's your ambition for humanity? Do you have any humanitarian ambitions?
Great question. I hope for the end of humanity. Not in a kind of ethicist sense, but we now have the at least the knowledge, if not the horrible human urge to control things and fuck things up. But we have enough insight now into how biology works to engineer ourselves. And I would love it if we could engineer ourselves to be more efficient in digesting food, just very basic stuff like that, up to genetic engineering on some sordid scale, like changing our psychology and so on, and scaring all the friggin' rednecks with those kind of thoughts. But also, I would like us to venture out into the universe. We live in a minute fraction of a millionth of a percentage of the universe, and I think at some point we should leave the nest. But it won't be humans that leave it. It will be whatever we turn ourselves into. And I would like to talk about what we are going to turn ourselves into, but I hit the stumbling block of what do we want to be? If we're going outside of our biology and in some Mendham sense, all we are is just cannibalism, consumption, reproduction, and addiction. What should we be? What do we want to be? What can we turn ourselves into? What can we make our psychological goals? If we can engineer our psychology, what can we make ourselves want, and what can we make ourselves strive for? And those are the kind of questions that I just think are totally unanswerable. What should we do?
Well, I mean, it sounds like a real transhumanist perspective. Yeah, and it seems as if we're on the forefront of that. But yeah, what do we turn ourselves into? What, you know, that's a great question. As far as your involvement in it, what do you say? Do you have any ambitions to be a part of anything that's of that transhumanist perspective?
I don't really consider it to be transhumanist. I consider my mentality to be post-humanist. You know, I don't think we're transforming into something. I think we're, you know, as far as I come from politically, I'm a progressionist, and progression comes from moving away from the negative, you know, moving away from all these destructive and hateful traditions and conventions that we have. So I guess it would be that way. I guess if we were to engineer ourselves, I think we could engineer away a lot of the traits that are about negativity and judgmentalism. But on the other hand, you know, that's really sinister talk to a lot of people. A lot of people would see that as evil, you know, some kind of horrible plot to, you know, instill Agenda 21 and wipe out the human race or whatever. I mean, I'm not for wiping out the human race, but you know, we could be so much better. We have these aspects in us, and we have these moral compasses within us, where we can move beyond a whole lot of the shit that we've dragged into this third millennium, in quotations, and you know, we can move beyond it, but we don't want to. We don't want to engineer ourselves to do so. I think, as far as transhumanism goes, if we do start manipulating our genetic code, obviously the first appearances of that would be bigger tits and, you know, all the looks and things like that, you know, and we'd probably eradicate particular skin colours and all that shit, you know, all the things that, you know, kind of exemplify why we need to move beyond humanism. You know, because we are so fucking crude and visceral, and that's the default position, I think. And you know, I'm sure Mendon would be in agreement with me here. But you know, I see potential. I don't see fault. I see potential. He sees fault. I see potential. You know. Tomatoes, all that kind of crap.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I mean, what you're saying in my mind sounds like a transhumanist perspective, in that we're progressing towards something of maybe an integration with technology to modify our genetic code, or to merge with technology in a particular way, and I don't think anything's going to stop that. I think that's happening regardless of this stupendous desire to end the human race. I don't know. I don't know quite what to say about it, other than I agree with you in a lot of respects. I don't know about the whole getting off the planet thing. That sounds pretty rich there as far as an idea, but who knows? Who knows what space travel will bring? You know, for certain.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, sorry. Yeah, it's like, if we can engineer ourselves, should we engineer ourselves to be content? Like in Brave New World, it's like the gammas are the lowest of the low, but they're happy being the lowest of the low because they've been engineered to be happy with being in that position. So, in a sense, they're not the lowest of the low. I mean, where do we go? How much do we fiddle with? And is it ethical to do it? Is it unethical to not do it? Is another question. You know, can we be happy on planet Earth? Can we engineer ourselves to be happy on this planet? I think we could, and I would be in agreement with some way of making ourselves fit into this world that we seem at odds with and antagonistic with is a reasonable and rational goal. But what happens in a billion years' time or 3 billion years' time when the sun expands and destroys the planet, you know? Potentially the only sentient life on the planet, the only sentient life in the universe, i.e. Terrans, is extinguished, you know? And that's something for future generations to deal with.
Yeah, I never consider a billion years in the future. My thoughts are, you know, kind of end at about 100 years in the future, you know, just because I think there's going to be such a radical difference between who we are now and who we will be then as people. And so the idea of a billion years when the sun explodes, I imagine by then technology would have expanded to such an extent that getting off the planet might be a feasible thing if it's even desirable at that point, provided we don't fall into a base idiocracy, which I don't buy that philosophy either. I don't think that's occurring. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know is kind of the default answer to that for me. Not that you asked, but thanks for asking. Yeah.
As I say, they're unanswerable questions, so what can we...
Well, yeah, your volume cut out there on the end. I hope your mic's still working. But nope, it looks like it's finished working. Uh-oh.
Talking on the wrong thing.
Oh, there we go. You're talking in your electronic cigarette. Speaking of transhumanism, you have electronic cigarette? As if that's...
It's bizarre, isn't it? It's like I'm foregoing the organic and I'm instead electrically combusting some kind of chemical composition instead, and it feels wrong and artificial, but at the same time, I'm not going to die from cancer.
What do you want to die of, Gratex?
Sex.
leave a lumping, breathing body exhaling upon somebody, some poor feline out there. Yep. Yeah, why not?
Well, she might be on top of me.
Right. Ooh, who can imagine?
It's like, I don't know if you watched Game of Thrones, but this guy's about to kill this little dwarf character called Tyrion, and the big scary barbarian says, "How do you want to die, little man?" And he responds, "At the age of 80, with some prostitute sucking my cock." And that dissuades the barbarian from killing him.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't watch that. I don't have television or cable, for that matter. So I should probably cue into some of that sometime. Kind of feel left out of the...
I don't have TV either, to be honest with you. You download it off the internet. That's how it works nowadays. Make way for the big fish said they want to die in a volcano crater of lava.
Oh. Yeah, I thought of Joe versus the volcano, that kind of just plummeting oneself into a volcano as a way to die. But I think I would rather die of beheading if I get my chance. You know, it would be somewhere in the 80s. Hopefully by the time we get to that age, you know, medicine is so far advanced that where people are living into their 120s, something like that. But at the same time, you know, hopefully the quality of life is really good. But I just want a quick death, but perhaps a sexual death would be desirous also. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Yeah, there's no poor answer there when you mention that. That sounds like a great way. So who am I kidding?
You've got to die at the height of your pleasure. That's what I think. You know, I don't like Dennis Leary as a comedian, but he did make a good point. He was telling an anecdote about this guy who had been through some trauma where he was starved for months on end. I think it was some kind of soldier or something like that. And when he finally got out of that situation, he was in a restaurant with his parents, and he had his favourite meal, which was like an omelette or some crap like that. And he ate the omelette and then died. You know, it was the ultimate pleasure in his life. He had his favourite meal after all this starvation and horror, and he'd reached that point where it was at his pinnacle of his enjoyment and his pleasure, even if it seems absurd to other people. That's how you want to die, isn't it? It's like this kind of silent green death where you're faced with all these pleasurable images and sounds and so on, and then you just fade out. That's how pretty much everyone wants to die, you know, or standing at a bar and then that's another Dennis Leary thing. You stand at a bar and then all of a sudden you have this instantaneous heart attack and die without pain or suffering or anything like that. That's how to die. But, you know, my plans to die, plans to kill myself, are basically to have I used to call it a life raft, but now I've realised after discussion with, I can't remember who on YouTube, it's a death raft. Basically, you get this life raft, one of those things in like the James Bond movies that have got this cover over them, and it's airtight, and you just get some drugs, get some music, get some drink, float out into the ocean, and kill yourself with nitrous oxygen. You know, it's a painful death, a painless death, sorry, and you don't have to worry about funerals and people going through ridiculous ceremonies or whatever. You just die out in the Atlantic, and there's nothing to worry about.
Mm.
That's death for me.
Well, that sounds great, and I do want to die in a pleasurable setting where I'm thinking good thoughts and I'm having a highlight. But I always thought that, you know, I wanted my body strung up on a wheel and painted as a clown and spun around in public. Just this nude clown body spinning, you know, maybe with a television of different things that I've said playing, and kind of, you know, go out or have this post, you know, this ritual of a spinning nude body, and I don't know why I thought that would be good, but that would be ultimate exposure, I think. The guy dying on one movie where he's like, he chooses to die by having all these naked women chase him down and run him off a cliff or something like that. That sounded like a great way to die.
I remember that movie, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, God. Movies. See,
I think that was Monty Python, was
yeah, that could have been Monty Python. Sure. You know, the thing that I thought was awkward about going to Paris and then watching the Parisian TV and so forth made me wonder why is it there's no huge movie industry in Europe that rivals Hollywood. You know, why are people not trying to create that over there? Is there not a need? Or people, you know, or why do you think that is?
It's a tricky one to answer because I think we do make a lot of movies here. It's just that there's no industry here. There's no movie making industry. France was pretty much the centre of movie making from the get-go, before Hollywood as an industry even existed. But it just kind of died off and Hollywood took over. There's a lot of industry involved in Hollywood and there's a lot of go-gettitiveness, and I think that's really what carries Hollywood. But there's also a lot of bullshit like the Oscars and the Academy and all that kind of crap. But really, I mean, most Hollywood movies are high budget, but they are utterly shit for the most part. You know, you could watch an independent movie from Korea or some other country that's just amazing and groundbreaking, and changes your state of mind from when you leave the theatre, and for maybe a week or two, maybe a month, or maybe a few years later, you'll still think about it. But there are not a lot of Hollywood movies that honestly make me feel that way. You know, I've watched The Matrix. A week before I watched Dark City, and they're pretty similar concepts. And Dark City was a Hollywood movie, but it was based upon anime. Um, but I feel more affinity with Dark City than I do with The Matrix. You know, and obviously the subsequent Matrix movies were a total fucking disaster. But it's just Hollywood. I look forward to them. They're entertaining yarns that are a distraction from whatever, or an excuse to go out on a date, or to go and meet up with buddies and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's what America's all about, in my opinion. From an outsider's perspective, America is about establishing routines. And that's why Hollywood's so successful. It establishes a routine of doing something, and having something to occupy, some kind of slot in your life. Sorry if that's offensive in any way, but from an outsider's perspective, that seems to be what the Hollywood movie industry is about. But as far as the non-Hollywood movie industry in America is concerned, there's a lot of great independent movies that come out, low budget, even medium budget movies that come out that are just amazing and mind-altering films, even in this contemporary era. Movies like, well, I don't want to say Drive, but I'm kind of struck to find some kind of example just now because I'm freaking drunk. But Drive was an amazing movie. There was no real dialogue from the protagonist for about half an hour into the movie. These kind of movies are ones that you look for. But as far as Europe's concerned, I just don't think. I think we just rely upon America to do that for us, basically, and
Yeah.
that's not just with movies; it's with politics and world affairs and all that kind of crap as well.
Yeah, I know that it is that way, but it's just really curious to me why there's not an upheaval for competition in movie making, a whole industry to be discovered over there and brought to life and to be competitive. And when I watched this Scottish film, it kind of gave me hope, like, oh well, at least Hollywood is filming in these countries, which is great. It's this idea though that I just wanted to see published works from these countries that were from an industry of their own creation. And I don't know. It was just kind of a hope, and it was kind of weird. It was a bit of a letdown to know that Europe relies so heavily on U.S. entertainment. Uh,
I think there used to be in the 90s. I don't know if you've seen Trainspotting, but
mhm.
that was kind of independent of Hollywood. Cool. And before that, there was Shallow Grave as well, which is and also I can't remember his name now. Not Ewan Bremner. Ewan McGregor, who was in Trainspotting. He was in Shallow Grave, and that was a really great independent film in Scotland. But there hasn't been much successful things. There was some kind of post-apocalyptic zombie-style movie, I think,
Oh, 28
in
days
the
later.
last 5 years that was brought out.
28
I
days
can't remember
later.
the name of it for the life of me.
28 days later.
There is that, yeah, but it's not even as Hollywood-esque as that. It was. I'll have to look it up at some point. Perhaps the mad commenters will know what it is, but that was quite interesting. There was one of the actors from it was in V for Vendetta. There's a police officer in V for Vendetta. But really, I don't think that style is. I don't think Europeans embrace the Hollywood style. I think that's what it comes down to. And it might be snobbishness, but it might be the fact that, hey, we can just let Hollywood do that and we can focus on other things. I think that more than likely is the excuse as to why there is no great movie industry. Although, as I mentioned, Korea, there's lots of Hollywood-esque style movies coming out of Korea just now, but in my opinion, Korea is still, harking back to some kind of celebration of Americanism and trying to emulate it, based upon, obviously, the historical context of that country.
Yeah. Yeah, it is just really weird. It's really weird, and I've taken my own country for granted in a lot of respects because I categorically stayed away from the military because it's got such a huge military might, and dodging. I don't know. When I lived in LA, I did some reading of scripts at a school there that were being submitted for Hollywood, but at the same time, it just I never got involved in the industry proper. I thought I might do some art, some backdrop art at one point, but things were moving more into a technological end. But yeah, it's interesting that it's just kind of a sit back and let America produce the film sort of attitude. I thought because there's European school in philosophy and there's European European culinary respects are really huge, meaning the food that comes from Europe is considered greater than food that's made in America in a lot of senses. I mean that's almost where our schools come from. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I just expected there to be competition in the film industry coming from Europe at some point. And maybe I'm maybe that's not too far off. Maybe it's coming about, or maybe there's going to be more independent filmmakers and that they'll be stemming from Europe. But the things I have seen are just short musicals made in England or in the Czech Republic, Croatia area, and they've been really delightful, kind of very very hippie, mountainy sort of musical music videos that I watch, and but that's about as close as I can see, and they were produced there, and they're produced by. It'll be interesting if I can pull up the channels and share those channels, maybe in the low bar if I can find them. I'm subscribed to one, but I just can't recall the name of it right now. I don't know. It's a hope for me that Europe takes on a music, not a music industry, but a film industry, and that you become a huge part of it, Gratex. Oh yeah.
I'll try.
Okay. Because I was trying to get ambition out of you, and you went into transhumanism, or something akin to transhumanism. But
well, that's the thing. I think you might have hit on it. I don't think there's any great ambition here. We just sit back and let the rest of the world do shit. It's like we don't in Britain. We don't consider ourselves to be European, but we are
right.
European, and I think we're done with the whole egoism. We're done with the whole colonialism and imperialism thing. We just want to live our lives and enjoy our friends and all those kind of wholesome things. And, and we're perturbed by other forces in the world not wanting to do those things, like the Americans and the Russians, and God only knows what the Chinese want to get up to in a few decades' time. But I think we're just kind of content. We're kind of in this period of our history where we're just like, yeah, whatever. We'll just get on with it. We'll just live our lives. This is peacetime for us. Through decades, stroke millennia of conflict and horrible things and walled cities and all these other things. So I think we're just kind of content just to get on with shit,
Okay, that's fair. That's fair enough. Well, I need to wrap up the YouTube video because we're going on an hour and a half, surprisingly. And so I'm going to quit that now. And but I'll stay on Tiny Chat for a little while. I'm feeling like I need some food, so I need to put something together. But that'll be in just a moment. Thanks for watching, and ciao and out, and thanks for Gratex for joining us and being a participant in my painting and philosophy video.